A nation can survive its fools, and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst those within the gates freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself.
Writing this book was the hardest thing that I have ever done. But I wanted people to know about the darkness that rests at the heart of power in this country, and about the small group of individuals who've actually been running the country for decades. Most of whom, most people will never have even heard of. And how those same individuals were involved in removing and engineering to remove previous prime ministers and leaders. Not just Boris Johnson, Ian Duncan Smith, David Cameron, Theresa May, Liz Truss. Each person I interviewed told me a similar story, that I was about to uncover something that was dark and deeply undemocratic. And I've spoken to well over 50 people, previous party leaders, prime ministers, cabinet ministers present and past, party grandees, special advisors, civil servants, backbenchers. What I discovered was that there was a plot to remove Boris Johnson, which was carefully constructed by this small group of men who years ago were known as the movement. Such is the power of this group of individuals that most people would only speak to me with a guarantee of anonymity. So who are they, the men at the heart of this sinister cabal? Well, there's Dominic Cummings, Michael Gove, a man that few people have heard of, Dougie Smith. But there was one man who, for legal reasons, I had to allocate a code name, and that name was Dr. No. So Dominic Cummings has been described to me as having a dark triad personality coupled with everyday sadism. David Cameron, in his diaries, described him as a career psychopath.
There's that famous picture of the PM and Carrie on the night of the general election win, triumphantly punching the air, as they had every right to do. And then there's Dom in the background, staring at his laptop screen as though he had some secret inside information and was emceeing the entire show. This one man carefully controlling the minds of voters. It was an utter joke. It was just Twitter and WhatsApps he was viewing on his screen.
At the centre of this web sits Michael Gove, and he is supported by a WhatsApp group which is run by his acolytes, many of whom work in Number 10. And it's entitled The Order of the Phoenix. On that WhatsApp group sits Dominic Cummings and Dougie Smith. Bear in mind, Number 10 is the engine room of the country.
Gove had all his acolytes ready to go when Boris became Prime Minister, and Boris would have seen this as an endorsement of Gove's effectiveness, that Gove had trusted people at hand, ready to serve, when really it was a WhatsApp thread managing a cult.
I worked it out once in the 8 a.m. meeting. 95% of people who were in the room were put there by Gove. While Boris was speaking, they were sending shitty little messages to one another on their weird cult WhatsApp group. It was out of order. During the 8 a.m. meetings with the PM, Dom would text, "What the fuck is this clown on about?" to other people in the room.
And this was in the Prime Minister's morning meeting. It was completely outrageous. And what they were doing was this constant process of undermining the Prime Minister. And it was quite obvious what they were doing to everyone except the Prime Minister, who had no idea. And then there's Dougie Smith, who very few people know. Nobody's really ever met him. And yet he's been paid a very handsome sum by Conservative Central Office for decades. And he sits now at the heart of Number 10 Downing Street. And yet he appears on no staff list anywhere. He's a murky character with a deeply terrifying reputation and an unsavoury past.
This man, the faceless employee in central office who's been paid a grand salary for, 20, 30 years maybe, for doing what exactly? I'll tell you what, controlling the Conservative Party and who becomes MPs. Putting into play the dark arts that are so dark, people are too scared or intimidated or whatever to say what they actually are. Arts which have destroyed the careers of numerous ministers. The vast majority of these arts are used against your own party and people and whoever is leader or prime minister. And by doing that, in my book, they control the country, everyone and everything.
So I asked Boris, what did Dougie Smith say to you when he phoned you long before you'd resigned? And he explained to me. So he said, he was pretty robust and to the point. He said, I think you should go, you should stand down now, and we may let you come back again one day. You are like poison, like Nixon, and if you don't go, I'm going to take you down and I'll finish you off. So remember, this is somebody who is completely unelected, who very few people know, who is telling the elected Prime Minister of the day, we may let you come back one day. The final member in these key four players is the person I codenamed Dr. No. And the evidence I uncovered surrounding Dr. No was deeply shocking. Criminal activities that saw him land in prison, and acts of extreme cruelty to people who may find themselves caught in his crosshairs.
For the traitor appears not a traitor. He speaks in accents familiar to his victims, and he wears their face in their arguments. He appeals to the baseness that lies deep in the hearts of all men.
It was really obvious at all the meetings I was at that Boris came into power thinking that everyone in Number 10 was committed to public service, and they were all on board Team Get Things Done. But the only team that existed was made up from a certain group of individuals who were on the team Get Boris Out.
The movement were furious because Boris had won too big. Boris would have gone through to the next election and won comfortably if those in Number 10 and close advisors hadn't worked so hard to bring him down from day one.
Boris began to find it very hard to get things through. They would blame the civil service, but mostly it was Rishi in the Treasury. To his face, Rishi was charming and helpful and enthusiastic, even if he did keep overtly hinting that Boris should stand aside to Rishi. It was laughable. Boris genuinely thought that Rishi was a team player. He was a team player, but for Team Rishi.
I am surprised Boris never saw it coming. The same scenarios and outcomes enacted by the same people. They are addicts, addicted to power and politics. When Boris won the 2019 election, I said to him, do not employ Dominic Cummings or Michael Gove. If you do, I give you less than 2 years. They will destroy you.
So I told Boris what Ian Duncan Smith had said to me, and I asked him why had he kept Dominic Cummings and Michael Gove inside the tent. And he said to me, there were people telling me I should have sacked Gove long ago. He wasn't delivering and he was insubordinate. I thought he was capable, knew how to run a department, and I thought it would be better to have him on board working with us than on the outside causing trouble. Cummings used to put me in difficult situations by briefing in order to bounce me into a policy decision. That's why he started calling me the trolley, because he would decide on a position that he wanted to bounce me into, whereas I wanted to bounce around all the angles of a policy and weigh it up, and he hates that. I wasn't allowing him to call the shots, and that was obviously what he was used to.
Rishi was the central part of the plot. He was the axis it rotated on, and has been for years. But he's also totally unaware that they won. And now, the same people, they're plotting against him. I remember when everything came out about his wife's non-dom status and her financial affairs. He thinks he's survived it. What he doesn't realise is that they don't give everything away at once. They will have more, and when it is time to remove him, it will all blow up again. And when it does, they'll milk it. They keep the best for the last.
Rishi will be useful for now, but he's just another Michael Howard to them. He's a stopgap, and his time will be short. First, though, they will use Rishi, they will benefit from Rishi. Then, when they have done so, they will remove him and replace him with Kemi, the person they have been preparing for many years.
If you're looking at the group of men who live in the shadows of our party, who truly decide who the Prime Minister is, then you should look a little closer at Kemi. They're always one step ahead, and if you want to see how that works, who her friends are, who she takes her holidays with, who the people are who are whispering in corridors, then I think you may find that a fruitful path to explore.
Someone else once asked me about Gove. It was a minister. She said to me, "Michael Gove is so tricky to work with. I think you have to work out the endgame in order to survive working with him." And I said to her, "You're wrong. There is no endgame. It is just a game."
I do believe that once these people are gone, the Conservative Party can become a great party again, and I think your book is necessary in order to achieve that after the swamp is drained.
So are we always told that our power, the power of the people, lies in the ballot box, that it flows through the ballot box into Westminster? Well, this group of people, they recognised the winning qualities in Boris Johnson, and they rode on his coattails straight over the threshold and into number 10. But once they got there, by the most duplicitous means imaginable, they plotted to remove him. And you know, that wasn't enough for his enemies. Once they removed him, they were not going to stop. And they continued until they had nailed down the coffin lid.
He rots the soul of a nation. He works secretly and unknown in the night to undermine the pillars of the city. He infects the body politic so it can no longer resist.